Hi, welcome to Under the Dome. Returning to Town Meeting TV as part of our ongoing legislative coverage. We'll be checking in with legislators from around our coverage area in the next several months. Mondays at 12 p.m. It's a live call-in show, so feel free to call in at 802-862-3966. Today, we are joined by Chittenden County Senators, Thomas Chittenden and Kesha Ram-Hinsdale. If you want to introduce yourselves real quick, we can just go down the line. We'll start with you, Tom.
Great. So I'm Thomas Chittenden. I'm serving in my first term in the Vermont State Senate. I'm currently serving on the Senate Education Committee as well as Senate Transportation. Happy to speak to some of the things that we're doing there. I also serve on the Vermont State Infrastructure Bank and also on the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee for the legislature.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Senator Kesha Ram-Hinsdale. This is my 10th year in the legislature, only my second year in the state Senate. Proud to be the first woman of color in the state Senate. So this will be my fourth and fifth committees that I've served on overall in my decade in the legislature. I serve on Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, and Senate Government Operations. Both of those span a lot of subjects, so happy to be of as much help as I can to Vermonters listening in.
Great, great. And we can just start diving in right now on committees. You're both on lots of different panels and committees, so I'm sure a lot to talk about. Thomas, anything in your committees, any items you've been looking at recently that you'd like to go into?
Great. So I'll say a few things, but just give me an indicator if I'm talking too long. Okay.
Sure.
So on Senate Education, which we're still meeting, Senate Transportation has wound down a little bit over the last week after we passed the transportation bill out of committee. But on Senate Education, I'll be reporting a bill that Senator Kesha Ram-Hinsdale had a large part of. So H517, in there are two bills that you were the lead sponsor on, having to do with military families and making Vermont more, having some accommodations to allow for military families to more ease into and transition into the great state of Vermont. It also has to do with eligibility benefits for our Vermont National Guard, and it also is taking on a topic related to our Adjutant General and the eligibility criteria for that. So I'll be reporting that on the floor on Tuesday, so that's on my mind, so I don't make any foolish comments in front of my colleagues. We also are spending a lot of time on a topic that is honestly the most dense bill that I have yet to wrestle with. Wow. This is H727, a very important bill having to do with how forced union districts from Act 46 as well as regular union districts can, if they follow what the process is for them to dissolve a relationship with a school district or school union. So I have been struggling a lot with this, taking a lot of testimony, following a lot of emails, and we will be diving into it more this week before we pass it on. I hope you don't ask me any questions about it because I'm not sure how technical I will be, but know that I am listening from lots of community members trying to understand what's most important to them. As a new senator, new legislator, without the 10 years of experience, I just want to say how remarkable legislative council is. I make the silliest comments and they translate it into very useful and articulated language that can strive for what we want to have represented in the bills that are before us. Go ahead.
Well, two things. One, just to put a fine point on that, many people listening at home might not realize that we don't write our own bills. We have a team of attorneys who are incredibly dedicated and knowledgeable and have to go very deeply into certain topics where we dare not venture, and then come back out with legislation we can read and understand and keep iterating around. So it's a great point that Senator Chittenden makes. Senator Chittenden, I know sometimes we pass something and think, okay, on to the next thing, but you might want to speak to the transportation bill a little bit. It's so important to Vermont. I didn't want to be the moderator, but
Please.
The bus service, new investments in pedestrian safety and bikeability.
Happy to, and we just reported that out on the floor on Friday, so it was high on my mind. So there were some great things in this very comprehensive bill called the Transportation Bill that came over from the House, and in there, exactly as Senator Ram-Hinsdale just spoke to, is there's going to be $1.2 million to continue fare-free service throughout Chittenden County, so that's a very exciting thing. It also will allow for microtransit grants, so we in the Senate increased the microtransit grants to go up to, I think, $1.2 million, if I'm recalling correctly, and those are really useful grants to look at how we move people around and to foster creativity. I used to serve on the GMT Transit Board, and one thing that I was really excited to see is that on-demand transit service in the Montpelier area seems to be working, and it seems more dynamic with less fixed route, heavy, expensive buses just If you live in Chittenden County, you might have seen a bus going down the road with nobody in it, and I usually hear emails or get people reach out to me saying, why are we paying for empty buses to go around town? So we need to look at more dynamic, flexible public transit solutions to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles and to make living without a car much more amenable and flexible. Microtransit grants are supporting creative new approaches to that, doing just that. And what's been successful in Montpelier can hopefully flourish. I know the city of Winooski is looking to be the next pilot program for microtransit, which would be an Uberized type, if I can use that word on a public access show, a more flexible way to find public transit opportunities for people to get to where they need to be on demand requests. I could also talk about the PGE aggregates. So I'm really excited that in the transportation bill we are creating a local market for crushed glass. Right now when we recycle our glass, it gets put in trucks and shipped down the interstate to Massachusetts, burning fossil fuels, and those are heavy loads wearing our roads down. Or it's put on a train going down to South Carolina. With these standard changes through the Transportation Act, both the state, VTrans, which is the owner regulator of most of our roads, can now use that aggregate for the underlayment of our roads. So that will actually keep it here in the state, burn less fossil fuels, moving heavy items around. Also in there is an important topic to me, so with my experience on municipal level with the Burlington International Airport. So I serve on the South Burlington City Council. I'm in my 8th year, and one thing that I've studied over the years is how there are different ways to have decisions being made over public infrastructure like airports. And so I'm excited that the language is in the transportation bill going over to the House from the Senate, which is just asking to look at it. No predefined opinions, no set opinion on what it should look like, but instead just asking really smart people to study and evaluate how the airspace over Chittenden County should be overseen and how we compare to other areas. I think I've talked too much. Should I expand on anything else?
Well, I mean, I was only going to add when you mentioned, this new opportunity with keeping crushed glass in the state. We have a new emerging company called Glavel in Essex Junction that is leading in terms of figuring out how to make crushed glass most useful for the Agency of Transportation. So we have a local business ready to take on that kind of work when we pass this legislation, and that's what we like to do, is make things get out of the way sometimes for innovation to happen.
Right. Well, great. Thank you. That's a lot of topics to cover. Senator Ram-Hinsdale, do you want to talk about some of your committee work?
Yeah. So I'll start in chronological order. I spend my mornings in economic development, housing. There's big topics in that committee, particularly coming out of this pandemic, and knowing that we got into this pandemic with a housing crisis and with a lot of economic need that was existing. We have moved about $3.5 billion of economic recovery through our committee, through the state. That includes supporting small businesses. It includes emergency funds for workers. It includes the housing dollars that are going to tenants, homeowners, landlords, trying to figure out the right mix of getting support for people so they can stay in their homes. I was the lead sponsor of S226, which is still making its way through and has been the major landmark housing bill of the session. Some of the important things to me in that bill include first-generation homebuyer grants. It's one thing to help people stay in their housing situation. It's another to hopefully emerge with new opportunities for homeownership for Vermonters who haven't had generational wealth. And so very excited about that piece, but there's a lot in there that should get more housing built and more housing available, restore historic buildings, make commercial buildings into residential buildings. We just need the full mix of options in the state, especially as we have conversations around ending homelessness as well. With our economic development, we passed H-159. I think it's an H bill. I have managed to be in this work for 10 years, getting confused with the numbers and the bills, but focusing more on the topics. But that bill was a larger economic development bill as opposed to H-703, which we still have in committee that's workforce specific. With our economic development bill, one thing of note is that we passed an accelerated minimum wage increase to $15 an hour by 2024. And as the chair of our committee remarked, Senator Michael Sorokin, who's also a Chittenden County State Senator, when he spoke to the bill on the floor, he said, I have done a lot of minimum wage bills in my life, and this one hung out there, an acceleration to $15 for weeks on our wall. We discussed it. we usually in moments like that have a lot of feedback and some pushback. And we did not hear a single word of concern about accelerating that minimum wage increase. I think people deeply understand that, with the rising inflation and just with, the need for workers who are willing to brave, continuing unsafe conditions and just are balancing childcare and other factors that keep them from being able to access the workforce, that $15 an hour is the absolute bare minimum that we should be paying Vermonters. So we're very excited to be accelerating the minimum wage. 703 is a really large workforce development bill, and we recognize that we have a worker shortage in almost every field imaginable. And the question is, what is our role as government as we look at nurses and medical professionals, our emergency management services and ambulance services, teachers, and shortages in our education system. So we're looking at those, critical systems that help ensure that the rest of the state can function and trying to figure out how to get more workers into the pipeline.
Right. Wow.
all in a day's work, and that was my first committee, but I'll stop there before I get to government operations.
Let's pivot for a second then, and maybe come back to some of the committee stuff, and let's talk about redistricting. So the Senate just recently approved some redistricting maps, and I think Chittenden County is not going to be just one district for senators anymore. It's going to be split up. So if you guys want to go into that a little bit.
Sure. I'll start. Senator Chittenden jumped right into the process and, understood it quickly and was a great advocate for, communities that sometimes get left behind in this process. It is my second redistricting, so I think I was trying to remind him it can feel very emotional, and then there are a small number of people for whom it deeply matters who are generally involved in politics and local governance, and for everyone else, they just wake up on election day or get their early ballot and say, who am I voting for? What are my choices? So it's something that we can feel really deeply, and certainly it does matter. Redistricting is a critical issue when we look at other states and how districts get carved up that affect racial dynamics, affect who we send to Congress. We don't face the dynamic of having more than one congressional seat, so that doesn't come into play for us. And I think this year, again, as we did 10 years ago, we do this every 10 years with the census, we've come up with something that's very fair and truly nonpartisan. And I think that's the most critical. Right now we know there is a northern district that will probably have two Republicans running against each other. When we collapse sometimes rural districts where they've lost population and add districts where we've gained population, we do have a new South Burlington seat, for example, in the House. On the Senate side, we took a historic vote several years ago to put in motion a breaking up of our huge county district. Huge, even by national standards. We're a very outsized, at-large Senate seat district with 6 people serving the county because of our population size here. We are a third of the Democratic primary vote here in Chittenden County. Whereas we often just keep to county boundaries for the most part, and that means we have 1 to 3 senators in other counties. We've had 6 in Chittenden County. It's daunting to be in a crush of 20 candidates running for 6 seats. But we did want to recognize that the House can be more of a provincial place, and the Senate, as has been said, for centuries about the U.S. Senate, is where the tea goes to cool. It's where you have to have a lot of aggregate interests in mind and take a broader view. And I think we accomplished that with breaking up the Chittenden County Senate District generally into a northern district and a southern district. We do also have a new district, given the population shift, that straddles a bit of Chittenden County and a bit of Franklin County. But we now have, essentially 7 seats, and then if you count Colchester and Grand Isle, we have 8 senators who have some piece of looking at Chittenden County. I think the biggest pushback we got, or the biggest questions we received, were around the split between Essex and Essex Junction and the split between northern Burlington and southern Burlington. Now what I can't, and we also have the new city of Essex Junction, which I reported that charter change, so it now is 2 separate municipalities. The Burlington piece, we did have a long conversation with South End residents who were concerned that Now they share a district with Richmond. They have really far-flung neighbors. They did before, right? Because we had 6 senators before. And I can tell you that when we talk about Burlington High School or other investments that Burlington needs, to me, it's, as someone who's represented Burlington for 8 years and now represents the larger county, it's really great to have 6 senators instead of 2. There was the question of, should we have just 2 Burlington senators? I can tell you, having served Burlington for so long, that those senators would likely be marginalized and not listened to as much as having a larger group of people who have to pay attention to Burlington. When I was in the House, I would, if we needed something for Burlington's bike path, I would go find the Winooski legislator, and I'd say they want it too, because often, Burlington is seen as close to the rest of the state. And so while that's hard for us to swallow here in this local community, it is a really big picture understanding that, Burlington needs to be sort of represented by a lot of different interests that are spread out across the county.
Right. Senator Chittenden, anything to add?
I'll add a few things, though. That was very eloquent. I just want to recognize the process, which you spoke to at the beginning, and also recognize that Senator Chris Pearson, who represents Chittenden County, took the lion's share of the effort for this. The committee that was formed had 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 2 that affiliate with the Progressive Party, as well as the chair. And it's very important that everybody know that it was unanimous, the final map, and then on the Senate, it was also unanimous. I think that speaks volumes for both the process that we do here in Vermont and how we came to come up with a map that people across the political spectrum see as the fairest solution. I also just want to recognize that I remember talking to Senator Baruth about the maps, and he says to me, Tom, that way lies madness. And
Yes.
I agree. As I was following the process and seeing how they'd move a line in this direction and that direction, and how it would have ripple effects throughout the rest of the state, there was no easy map. And one other thing that you spoke to, which I think is just worth emphasizing, that there were some early maps that showed Burlington as a clean 2-seat district. That actually made sense to me originally, but then I was really persuaded by both Senator Ram-Hinsdale, Senator Baruth, and others that the Senate is where you want a more, a wider view, a multi-municipal view, beyond just one specific municipality, so that you don't have a provincial take on issues. And now with this configuration that does in fact have most of the towns north of the Winooski River, including the bulk of Burlington, as one 3-member central district with Essex Junction, and then the southern part with a 25% of Burlington, that does a great job of keeping Burlington's voice in the legislature. Burlington is the largest city, it's the Queen City, and this is a great configuration that came about that I think is going to keep that dominant voice in all 6 senators that still have, as you said, a piece of Burlington in there. So I just want to recognize that the process is important. I'd be happy to go through how the districts are constructed for your audience. Would you like me to list the towns or direct them to the web?
I think maybe we can go to the map on that, but I am curious how that's going to affect your seats in this coming election, or which new districts are you guys going to be?
I'll speak to that. So I will be in the Chittenden Southeast District, which has the south end of Burlington, District 6-5. It'll become District 13, Chittenden 13, with a couple of tweaks. And then it also has South Burlington, Shelburne, Charlotte, St. George, Heinsberg, Williston, Bolton, Richmond, Underhill, and Jericho, a total of 11 communities. I really hope I didn't miss a town
No,
there.
good job memorizing. So you said St. George in there?
I
Oh,
did,
good.
I
Good
did.
job.
Yeah.
So I'll be in that district, and I am running for re-election, but I will say on that point, when I first got into the Senate, I went during the pandemic. I reached out to all the senators that I highly respect that have been in there for ages, and I sat down with Senator Sears and down in Bennington, and he said, Tom, when I first got elected, he was the chair of the aldermen of Bennington, and he said, when I was elected to the state Senate, I stepped down immediately. I thought about stepping off of my other role, some of you may know about, the South Burlington City Council, but I didn't. I made a commitment to fill out the term, which ends this coming March, and so as the second public place I'll announce too is I'm not going to run for re-election of the South Burlington City Council, so that this summer, as I try to earn the votes of people to continue in this role and hopefully become a better senator someday to the status of Senator Ram-Hinsdale, I will be focusing more of my attention in the coming years so that I won't be also spreading myself too thin on the council in South Burlington.
Right. Big announcement. Yeah.
Yeah. And we often say congratulations, but you have served well on that city council, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I often say it, not that Senator Chittenden spoke out of turn, but they're not our seats; they are seats we hold as long as we are privileged to have the support of the voters.
Right.
And I am not seeking re-election, as many know.
Yes.
I am running for Congress, so that in a way helps with the incumbency factor in the southern part of the county, only because there are going to be 3 seats and there are 3 people who currently have not announced intentions to resign or to not seek re-election. So, that still leaves room for others to run. This is a new configuration, and people may see opportunity in that central or northern 3-seat district. There are 2 incumbents and 3 seats. So once there's 1 open seat, it usually creates a big crush of people interested in getting engaged. And to my knowledge, the new Chittenden seat, that's Essex and Franklin County, does not have anyone currently in the Senate sitting in that area. So it is a completely new Senate seat.
Great. All right, we're running slightly down. We got about 10 minutes left, so we'll go back to some of the committee stuff now. Anything that you think are particularly important to communities in Chittenden County? Maybe this is a little beyond committee work as well, but just things that you think are really important to your constituents. We can start with Senator Ram-Hinsdale.
Well, I'm eager to speak only because being on Senate Government Operations, we do all of the local municipal charter changes in our committee, and it is customary that the senator from that county will often report those charter changes, and that's a big job when you're in Chittenden County. We've had some pretty significant charter changes come our way, and one being the creation of the first new city in Vermont in 101 years in the city of Essex Junction. That was a major decision after many votes in Essex Town and Essex Junction to try and figure it out, share governance or splitting up in amicable ways. And this is the most amicable solution that was found. But it allowed for a really historic moment for a new city to be born. And I think that's just a fascinating thing. It was a privilege to report that. And then Burlington has given us 5 charter changes to consider, and because they're all such varied topics, we have taken each of them separately. This session, we're considering really weighty issues in those charter changes that may have implications for the rest of the state if others see Burlington experiment with some of these and want to do something similar. And those 3 are thermal energy regulation, so looking at how especially with landlords and large complexes, the city is able to weigh in more and get more engaged in high energy use buildings, make them more efficient, and really reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Home heating, along with transportation, are our 2 biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a really interesting step for a municipality to take, and I think it will be trailblazing. 2 is just cause eviction. While it only applies to Burlington, we saw in Winooski that we almost lost housing for 200 people, for 25 families who were paying their rent on time, who through no fault of their own were going to lose their housing. Grateful to the Boves and the larger community for coming to an agreement where those families did not need to be displaced. But all of us in the legislature were speaking to not knowing where to put 200 more people in the county. We have the lowest vacancy in 20 years right now in the county. And so, I think I was proud to report just cause eviction on the floor. It's an issue where I think we should really be looking at that balance always between tenant rights and, property ownership, and ensuring that people who are following the law and paying their rent on time have that ability to stay in what has become their home. We don't know, with any of these, we don't know what the governor will necessarily do with our charter changes. He has not made it clear if he will veto them or not. The last one that we just voted out is ranked choice voting for Burlington, and that's for city council seats. We experimented with it with mayor. The city council chose not to forward that to the public around the mayorship, but we are now looking at approving ranked choice voting for city council elections in Burlington. With all of these, the governor could weigh in and veto these bills. There are a lot of times when he says he doesn't want cities and towns to have different practices than other places. With all of these, Burlington is a big city, and it is a place where, you want municipal government to experiment. And so I hope he allows all of these to become law.
Senator Chittenden?
So I would say the charter changes. When you frame the question as what's most important to the area, I will say this: for those of you that aren't really familiar with the inner machinations of the legislature, you focus a lot on what's in your committee, and then when things make it out of committee, that's when you have to do a lot of research, and you don't have nearly as much time to dive into the topic. So I've been receiving some emails about ranked choice voting, the bill that's coming to the floor this week. Very intelligent individuals raising concerns about the technical differences and the statistical considerations between the Hare method and the Condorcet ranked choice voting, or IRVs, and how you're going to classify it. So I've been spending a fair amount of time on this, and I originally had some concerns, but then as I read the bill and saw the good work that happened both in the House but as well as on the Council in Burlington, and then the clarification that you just offered, how it's just for city councilors, it gave me peace. But if you were to do it for mayor-wide, there are real issues or concerns with how you do ranked choice voting in a way that makes sense to the voters, and that's also logistically employable. I'm sure you've worked many elections. I've worked elections for the last 8 years in the city of South Burlington, and understand the idea of precinct summability and being able to display initially the results so that people can have an idea as soon as possible what the outcome of the election was. And if we don't do ranked choice voting in a way that makes it easier for people to understand the process and also get instant access without having to aggregate, to centralize, to move ballots around, or to somehow introduce variability into the process, I'm concerned about how ranked choice voting could be rolled out. So I really appreciate how both the House, the Senate, as well as the City Council framed the ranked choice voting around City Council races. That'll be for each individual ward, and that's where I come down to supporting what ranked choice voting is coming. But I do see in the next few years, we need to look at this more closely and find if we're going to bring it statewide, methods that will work for everybody and that we won't have variability, because there are some very technical statistical differences between the different approaches to that important topic.
We've got about 3 minutes left, so if you each have just a quick last thoughts before we go, we can start with Senator Chittenden.
I just want to say that the other way that I focus on topics, it is remarkable the breadth of topics that legislators have to vote on, and I do my homework as much as possible. I'm committing every free moment available to the matters that come before me. I just want all the people to know that it helps me when you reach out. So if you call or email me to tell me what's on your mind, I respond to as many of them as I can, but know that I read them all. So please tell me when something is on your mind or you're concerned about something going through the legislature, because it helps me understand topics from different perspectives, and I just don't have the breadth of perspective across the spectrum of issues that come before the legislature. So please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
So, we did a deep dive into areas where we have some focus and specialty. I would say the other three things that we hear from Vermonters a lot around are climate change, the budget, and the pension agreement that we're trying to come to, only because that affects so many Vermonters in our civil service and our educators. When it comes to climate change, I'm very proud to have led sponsorship of S-148, an environmental justice bill for Vermont for the first time, to make sure we're mapping environmental benefits and environmental costs around the state and ensuring that we don't have a concentration of energy poverty in Newport or asthma in Rutland, and we're not getting resources there to ensure greater equity, as well as the clean heat standard is something we're working through that will be a big sea change in how we fund thermal efficiency and home heating around the state. That will have a lot of implications, and it will be a longer process that we're starting now. On the budget, that is what we hear, of course, is, how with an $8 billion budget, the biggest budget we've ever passed because of federal support and recovery dollars, are we, can we not find $1 million for this or that? Most of what we do is in a much smaller pot of money. A lot of that money is spoken for in our education fund, our transportation budget, paying personnel at the state level who have contracts in place. So we're dealing with a much smaller pot of money, and I do think in so many ways we are trying to address the biggest issues of our day: mental health, supports for people who are falling through the cracks, just really laser focused on underinvestments we've made in our workforce in critical areas to Vermonters and trying to shore those up. And that's the hunger, just the best we can do to keep people fed and in greater well-being. And then the pension debate, we believe we've done great work in the House and the Senate. People should be on the lookout for the governor to weigh in, and what he would like is for the greater consideration of a defined contribution over a defined benefit that looks more like a 401k than a traditional public pension, And I have deep concerns about that because it does undermine, in my mind, the solvency moving forward of our critical pension system that people have been relying on. So, that's where I come down, but those are some really key end game issues to watch as we wrap up our session.
Great, thank you. And then thank you both for joining us. Thank you for tuning in Under the Dome. We'll return next week on Monday at 12 p.m. with Burlington Representatives Emma Mulvaney-Stanek and Carol Odie. You can watch this and other local political coverage on our website at cctv.org or on our YouTube channel, or on our channels at Comcast 1087, Burlington Telecom 17, and 217. See you next week.